I'm joined here today by the one and only academic agent. How are you, sir?
Very good. How are you?
I'm very good myself. Nice relaxing weekend. Although the front wheel of my bike managed to get stolen over the weekend, so I'm having to run around scrambling trying to fix that. So it's not ideal, but otherwise I'm pretty good.
Yeah, and the police won't do anything about that, do you? So,
Oh God,
you know,
no chance. I mean, it's only what £40 I think to replace it. So could be worse, but yes. Otherwise, I'm good, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Really, so I think if people are here listening to this interview, they know who you are, and if they don't know who you are, they should really find out on their own because what else are they doing with their life?
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we'll assume people know your basic background. You're one of the speakers which are returning from speaking at our event last year. So, what did you make of that?
Yeah, it was a lot of. I greatly enjoyed it. We had a good time. It was you know, good venue,
Hmm.
a nice crowd of people. Uh, Everybody was well turned out. I remember good food, good company, plenty of cigars. I remember,
Yes.
and it was. Yeah, I mean, the best thing was is really being surrounded by people who you can talk openly with, which I would warrant most people in most walks of life are not able to do under usual circumstances. So um, I think that was a big plus. And there were a lot of good papers, of course, last
Mm.
year. Not only mine, but everybody's. I mean, I remember a lot of the post show, the post conference reviews
Hmm.
gave us a lot of stuff to chew on and kind of set the bar rolling for the next year of the things that we were all thinking through. Um, and you know, I remember there was an event in America as well
Hmm.
where we were kind of able to uh, kind of the papers that were given there, watching the post conference streams gave us a lot to think about from there too. So I'm hoping that this year we will be building on some of the stuff we were talking about last time. 1 year on, 1 year more black pilled, etc. So,
It feels like more than a year black pilled in the way that this year's gone. It's been insane. But yeah, no, I agree completely. It's really good to be in a room with other people where you can talk to them freely, right? I mentioned to you offline, I started a new job relatively recently, and on one of my first days there, someone was complaining about people believing in the deep state conspiracy. And I was just, you just have to bite your tongue.
yeah,
But it's not the case when you're meeting all of these new and old friends at these events.
yeah. I mean, exactly. We've kind of reached. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've kind of reached a um, place now where you just kind of have to mentally accept that vast majority of people are just not worth talking to about anything like that. You just have to keep it to I don't know, football, Netflix. I don't know. I don't even know if I food. I don't know. What do you talk to normal people about? I have no idea.
Yeah, all that sort of thing. Yeah, one of my colleagues doesn't eat any vegetables, so you can't even talk about food with him.
Doesn't eat vegetables. What does he eat?
He eats like chips and meat and Pepsi, basically.
Yeah, so he's that kind of meme I posted the other day about the guy who counts chips as his
Yeah,
five a day. All five.
yeah, that's exactly it. So you've been planning your speech for this year. Do you want to give some teasers of what you are thinking of speaking about?
Yeah, so I've been thinking more about because obviously in the year between last year's event and this year's event, my book came out, The Populist Delusion, last year I spoke about culture being downstream from law. And I've been thinking more about now the exact mechanisms of the regime. Who are they? It's all well and good saying the regime, but what are its constituent parts? And I've been thinking of, in terms of it being an octopus with 8 tentacles. I was distressed to learn that apparently the octopus has been used many times by many groups in the past to describe various power structures. But I think I'm going to stick with it because it's my own octopus. It's not any other octopus. So first of all, what are those 8 tentacles, and then how do they relate to each other? And beyond that, what are the various factions at play within the elite? Because I think there's a tendency for us to talk about them, talk about the ruling class, the elites, and so on, as a kind of homogenous blob. So on the one hand, I do want to get away. I'm aware Yarvin is speaking at the event as well, but I want to get away from the emergent stuff. As you know, I think culture is top down. I don't think anything is bottom up or emergent in that sense. There is emergence in the system, but it's about incentive structures rather than about things happening spontaneously, if that makes any sense. But on the other hand, I want to get away from like capital C conspiracy theory as well. I'm aware Alex Jones has been on trial and stuff recently, but I don't think that stuff is helpful either. And I think that the COVID and the rise of what I call the kook sphere has led to a lot of extremely sloppy thinking around analysis of our elites as they exist right now. That tends towards deep conspiracy. So I mean, just like that the fellow that you said, the very term, the deep state, is tainted in that guy's mind, right? Now let's just imagine that we wanted to. I mean, we're not in the business of converting cattle, as you know, but imagine you came at it from another way. And you said, rather than talking in terms of the deep state, you said, well, why is it that all of these unelected NGOs, non-government organizations, have such an extraordinary influence over policy making in Britain? Why is it that Tony Blair, who was last in office in 2008, still wields extraordinary power and influence? Is that correct? Is that? I mean, first of all, if I could show you the existence of these NGOs, would you accept they exist and that they have an influence? And is that a good thing that they have this influence? I mean, maybe your friend would say yes, but I mean, rather than talking in terms of quote unquote the deep state, really, what are we talking about? We're talking about the relationships between international finance, the NGO network, how that alliance interfaces with the government and with the civil service and with all of the other kind of arms of the state, if you want, which includes the judiciary and the police and the armed services. All of these things have relationships without necessarily just being one big blob, if that makes any sense. So that's one thing I want to do, is give a properly realistic look to that, without resorting to either the emergent idea that nobody's really in charge, because that's clearly not the case, or B, the idea that there must be a hidden hand, that we have to invent some shadowy third party to account for the things that we can see with our own eyes. So that's the first thing I want to do. And then the second thing I want to do is really have a think about, well, okay, let's just pretend that it's true that we have these 8 tentacles. Which one of them, or which of those tentacles have priority? Which of them are sovereign, and which of them are, let's just say, order takers rather than order givers? And this is something that I hope will promote some conversation at the event, especially as Yarvin will be there, because my take on things is a little bit different from his. Everybody's familiar with the idea of the cathedral, but in Moldbug's system or in Yarvin's system, the cathedral is very much kind of in charge. It's sovereign, and it kind of sets the tempo for the rest of the system. Okay, so in his kind of idea, you get such a thing as woke capital, for example, because the ideas have filtered in through the universities and are pushed by the media. So we're getting a scenario, and I mean, maybe he doesn't think this anymore. He can correct me if he wants, but my understanding of Yarvin is that you get the woke CEO because the corporation is being disciplined by the media, right? Or because the PR team, for example, is being run by people who went to Harvard and Yale, and the kind of woke clause got into them that way. Okay. Whereas in my conception, the directionality, in a weird way, is coming from somewhere else. Where I'm tracing where I'm looking at the funding, I'm looking for, who is it that pushes these things? Where do they get their money from? What sorts of things do those organizations say? And once you start looking at that, you get into the world of the foundations. Everybody knows the big one, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but there are many others, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. And if you look into the history of kind of social justice movements in America, gay rights stuff, for example, you do find a huge network of these, multi-billion-dollar foundations behind it all. And you see, I have an idea that the what Mulber calls the cathedral, which was really, if you read them, old Marxist left in orientation, have basically been humiliated and crushed and disciplined by the forces of capital, if you want to put it in those kind of leftist terms. The Bernie Bros and the Corbynistas have been just completely taken out by what people now call woke, which is this kind of neoliberal, pro-capitalist, but also extremely gay thing. The multiculturalism and all the rest of it, which is one way that the regime has tamed one of the genuine threats to itself, which was the organized labor, the unions, which were very strong at one point, the working class and class resentment. It's completely destroyed those things that at one point in the 60s and the 70s had power, and now is nowhere, basically. So in my view, the Marxist left has just been humiliated and crushed by the neoliberal left, and the same forces do the same thing to the right wing as well. So genuine leftism and genuine rightism are crushed by a neoliberal center that has as its beating heart, if you want, international finance. And if you look at how the system is maintained, you'll see the directionality is that way. I mean, what you're telling me that a bunch of old kind of Marxist professors decided among themselves that they were going to, drop the whole being communist thing, and actually now they're up for Disney and Coca-Cola. It's obviously not. It's obviously the other way around, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. That the money, what the left used to call the money power, in a sense, is disciplining the rest of the system, rather than the cathedral, what Mulber calls the cathedral, disciplining the corporations. So that is something that I don't expect everybody to agree with. You don't have to agree with me, but the more I've looked at it, the more I find it difficult to not see the directionality that way around. And then on top of that, sorry, Maven. On top of that, there's another bit of complexity which I'll get into, which is that there is interfactional fighting within the elites, and different crises put different factions in charge for a little while.
Mhm.
So, I mean, just very quickly, the COVID moment was a moment where what I call the techno globalists had their kind of time steering the ship, but there's an identifiable neocon faction that got back into the driving seat when Ukraine came along. And once you start to know what to look at, I think that you can see that sometimes the bits of the octopus want to pull in different directions. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so we've all noticed on our YouTube feeds that Peter Zeihan's been heavily promoted recently, and I don't think that's any coincidence because he's aligned to some of these factions around American foreign policy and geostrategic interest. So that's one example of all of a sudden you've got this very influential person just appearing to try and tape out some of the commentariat's interest.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean there are a few other things as well. Like I think they ultimately want us to worry more about China than about themselves. If that makes any sense. I mean, Zahan's probably not a good example of that because he thinks China is a paper tiger or whatever. But in general, I think the system wants us to think about these foreign threats as being a bigger enemy to us than, for example, Nancy Pelosi or Biden or any of these figures, right? And we have to be vigilant, I think, about all of these. As soon as the permission starts, as soon as the system starts giving you like permission to start being a bit racist, you then have to really, well, what are they up to? Oh, we're against Chinese now. What's going on? You were trying to hug them 2 years ago. So yeah. I mean, we have to always be careful about containment. But I'm not going to. Thankfully, to the size of relief to people everywhere, I won't be talking about containment at the event. I'll be talking about just up the rate. People are fed up of me talking about containment, I reckon.
Yes, I'm sure there's more interesting things that you've got in mind then for the details of your speech. Two things stood out to me when you mentioned there. One was that you said many people will disagree with you, and I'm sure you'll agree that at the event last year and in the American events as well. I'm sure because you gave a speech there, the Q&A was as valuable as the talk itself.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that they're valuable for the speaker too, because you then have to, people can raise things you haven't thought about properly or counter examples or whatever. And when it comes to this topic that I'm talking about, or there is a lot of complexity there as well, and it's difficult for any one person to get there. I mean, I suppose there's nobody in the entire world who truly understands how it all works, but we have to. I think that at the moment we know who the enemy is, right? We know who the enemy is at this point, and we got a sense of what must, like, there's an increasing sense of what must be done, okay? Which is whether it's done through the system or outside of the system, we know there has to be some sort of circulation of the elites that we want to bring about, okay? But before we can do any of that, we also have to know exactly who we're fighting. And I do worry sometimes that about us getting a bit slapdash when it comes to exactly how all of this works. I mean, we were just talking about China there, for example, and in the deep conspiracy mind, while the Chinese and our regime are on the same side, they're working together. Actually, Vladimir Putin is working with them as well, and I'm just like, well, that doesn't seem to be the case. That really doesn't seem to be the case when you really look at what's happening. So, it just helps with our tactics and our strategy to know exactly what's going on and to get those relationships right to the best that we can.
To engage in some anti-coup action and refine some thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah, without lapsing into the kind of hand waving. Oh, you know, it's just immersion and nobody's in charge.
No,
Which,
exactly.
and I understand why people feel like that sometimes as well, because it's so fucking stupid, a lot of them. But you know, that's also not the case. We see moments of obvious intervention where, so I mean, just today, Maven, we've seen several organizations who started to sing a slightly different tune on Ukraine walk back their statements and apologize. Well, that's come from somewhere, right? Who are they apologizing to? You know, stuff like this. I mean, that's not an accident. That's obviously coming from somewhere.
Right,
It's
and
yeah.
lots of this, lots of where these things come from, they're not exactly hidden, you know, because they have to operate on such a vast scale that they can only do so to a large extent by operating in plain sight. I'll give an example of this. I made a Twitter thread about a year ago now, I think. On I had received an invite at work. Just, you know, they get your email address, they see your title, and they send you a bunch of things. One of them was from the Institute for Government inviting me to some diversity day and how to make your workplace more inclusive. And it was all about, you know, the agenda for the day was like, you know, pronouns, gay people, trans, you know, all disabilities, all these things, and how you can change the culture of your organization to suit this. So these organizations, they have to have funding from somewhere, because they're putting on these talks. They're setting you up in some, like, you know, London event for the day and feeding you food and drink. Money comes from somewhere, and they're in sending invites out to tens of thousands of people all the time to try and coordinate this.
Yeah, they're an organized minority who've managed through their organized efforts and, you know, other means to get resources together to, you know, affect your life, essentially, and to affect the legal framework that your company has to operate in. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we have to just, you know, aim to get the clearest picture that we can, and to stay vigilant and not, like, kind of lapse into lazy generalities, which it's easy to do, because, you know, there's just this tendency to want to treat the enemy like a blob, and really, if you look at the way they work, they have, like, really granular analytics on all of us, right, on everybody, and they often play divide and conquer with that information. So it's worth having a kind of more granular view of them, because the actual aim for us is to be an even more organized minority than they are.
Absolutely. In the event book that we published last year, one of the editors, along with Radlib, was one of our guys called Reen, and he included at the beginning a quote saying, "As iron sharpens iron, man sharpens man," and that's essentially what we're looking to do at these IRL events, is to sharpen each other, to test our ideas, and to, you know, get rid of some of these rough and weak edges and come up with, you know, better conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything else you're looking to bring up or to comment on?
No, not really. I mean, who else is speaking, and what's? I mean, I know you've done several other of these interviews, but what are some of the highlights of some of the other papers that will be at the event?
Yeah, so let me stretch my memory a moment. So we have more interviews coming up. I'm interviewing Evelyn shortly, and we're trying to book a date in with Closington and hopefully the two other speakers as well. We're trying. It's hard to nail down dates from some of these busy people, as I'm sure you can sympathise with. But yeah, other highlights. We just interviewed Rupert August, who will be a new name for yourself and for most people here, and he was talking about the need for a mythic restoration, harking back to the older parts of the English culture, which will speak to the blood, speak to the soul, and, you know, try and provide a framework for you to build more artistic visions on, and bind people together. You had Radlib talk about his experience converting Jews to Christianity as a youth, and how the tactics from that can be applicable to our side, which I'm sure will be both interesting and spicy. So that's going to be a very interesting talk. And there's all sorts. So yeah, do check out the other interviews we have on this channel if you're tempted by any of those. But mostly you need to buy a damn ticket, because there's only a limited number. And this is only a once-a-year event. The talks will not be online afterwards. You're only going to get this if you either read a book, which will come out at a later some weeks and months afterwards, or if you do the right thing, which is attend in person.
Speaking of that book, are they going to make me look like Mike Tyson again in there? I looked like Mike Tyson last time.
There's different portraits, I believe. I think it's the same artist, but they were given a different brief. I think last time they tried to make you look realistic. So maybe in real life you would resemble Mike Tyson, according to this artist.
Yeah, okay.
And I believe the brief this time was to make everyone look a little more elegant than they perhaps would otherwise. So maybe, who knows what you're going to look like now.
Okay. Maybe I'll get upgraded to like Muhammad Ali or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Well, thank you for this, and we'll see everyone at the end of the month. It's the 26th, 28th of August. So make sure to get your tickets. Not long enough now.
How many are going to be there, Maven? Thereabouts?
What total numbers? Well, you saw what it was last year. The capacity is 50% larger.
Wow. Okay. So there's been the event has expanded. The Witan is getting bigger.
Yeah.
Witan 2, bigger, better, better.
Yep, and we've already sold more than last year, so we're on our way to hit that. So I think there's limits on how big we can get, because if we were to go to say 500 people or something, it would change the feel entirely. And we do want this quite close, tight-knit, organized feel where most people can talk to each other.
We'd have to start vetting people at that point as well, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So I think this is about as large as we can get it without those other activities.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right. Speak to you later.